Hello, everybody. Welcome to OpenViews 2022. Today's panel will be about compliance and security and how fintech companies achieve these goals in the fast-paced, cloud world. I am Giuseppe. I'm VP Engineering at Belvo, and today I'm joined by two real experts and two very relevant guests. So we have Claudia Bellido. So Claudia is a compliance specialist at AWS. Claudia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, hello. I'm Claudia Bellido. I work for AWS as a compliance specialist. I focus on the financial sector, and it will be a pleasure to talk to you today.
Okay, and we also have Matt Spitz, who's heading engineering at Vanta.
Hi, I'm Matt Spitz. I head engineering at Vanta. Just as a quick intro to Vanta, we are a automated solution for security and compliance, helping our customers improve their security and then prove it via compliance standards or otherwise.
All right, so Claudia and Matt, thank you for for participating today. Super excited to be talking about these topics. And the reason why we're here today is so many things are moving in the kind of world of fintech, compliance, and security. And we believe it's nice to be able to kind of take a step back and kind of analyze and talk about the big trends and the kind of where the industry is going, and to be able to really understand what's happening around us, right? Well, with that, they'll probably cut to the chase, and we'll start talking about the topics that we have for today. And the first one that we had was discussing fintech is experiencing unprecedented growth. In Latin America only, for instance, in 2021, the investment funding has been 3 times what it was during 2020, right? So that is one thing that is happening. The other thing is new regulatory frameworks are being developed in various countries. Like things are moving in a few places, and with these two ingredients, we can expect a lot of innovation happening in this industry, right? And so, what do you think are the biggest challenges for companies building fintech and financial services, both globally as well as if we focus on Latin America in terms of security and compliance? So, Claudia, what do you think?
So, from a regulatory perspective, definitely understanding all the regulations that are all over around the world, both from the financial sector and privacy perspective. As you just said, new regulations are constantly emerging and the existing ones are changing. So catching up with all that they have to comply with in order to not get fined and to get their licenses, it's very complicated, it's challenging, but I'm sure that within the next years we will be able to catch up and make sure all the fintechs are in line with this regulatory environment. The other point is that some of the fintechs need to operate with all regulations that were built before cloud and all the new technologies. So adjusting their business models to the current regulation and negotiating with regulators is also another challenging. And ensuring each API and party in the process that is handling personal and sensitive personal information, because we are talking about the financial sector, has an appropriate control environment to prevent data breaches, frauds, or attacks, which have been increasing in the latest years. So I think those are the challenges.
Right. In Matt, like at Vanta, you probably this is your kind of bread and butter, right? You talk compliance, you work with a number of clients. Like, what do you think are the main challenges for security and compliance in the recent years?
Yeah, certainly. I think that, so if you look at the last few years, there's an increasing trend towards regulation and security proof. And what you've seen in the news a lot in the last, again, like the last 5 years is a preponderance of data breaches where companies are being irresponsible with their customer data and that data gets exposed on the internet. And so as a reaction to that trend, both governments and the private markets are trending towards wanting to be convinced of their vendors' security, because vendors are a primary source of data breaches. And the language we have for security proof today is compliance. So in the US, companies will go and get a SOC 2 compliance as a way to prove that they are secure. In Europe, it's more ISO 27001. And the idea here is that like the trend towards more compliance and more regulation is a response to more security, because ultimately, ostensibly, compliance certificates, well, security compliance certificates are some form of currency of proof that you are secure in some fashion or another. And with a greater scrutiny on security, there's therefore a greater requirements for companies of all sizes, not just big enterprise companies, but even two-person startups going and getting compliance certificates to prove their security.
Right. I mean, that definitely resonates with our experience at Belvo. These compliance certifications like ISO 27001 or SOC 2, at least in the fintech world, they sort of they become sort of table stakes, right? If you want to be playing with larger institutions and larger players, yeah, definitely this is the only way to be able to kind of play this game. So yeah, definitely agree with both of you. And kind of speaking about regulatory environment, like what are the kind of zooming in on regulatory requirements? What are the particular challenges that you think are emerging in this industry? Matt, you wanna go first on this?
Yeah, sure. I think again, the requirements of security and compliance are now for every company. It's not just the big companies. And especially thinking about smaller companies or companies that are moving fast or building things quickly, they may not have a fully funded team yet. The two big challenges that they run into when wrapping their head around a compliance certification are, one, understanding what they're even trying to do in the first place, right? Like SOC 2, ISO 27001, GDP, like these are PCI, that's like an alphabet soup of things that are in many ways like not core to what I should be spending my time on, finding product market fit, going and closing customers, going and closing great candidates. And so there's a big challenge in terms of effort and time and brain space for these companies to just sort of wrap their head around what these compliance standards actually mean. They have a lot of other things to worry about. And then once you've done that, once you actually apply the principles and concepts of these compliance standards to your business, then the next big challenge is actually gathering all the evidence to go prove it. And without automation, a lot of that, what that looks like today is spreadsheets and screenshots and emails and collecting all this evidence manually to instrument and gather all this data. And especially for compliance standards that are tracked over a long period of time, like SOC 2 Type 2, you end up having to collect data over many points of time over many months in order to prove that you've been secure over time. And so both wrapping one's head around these requirements and then actually doing all the work to prove that you're meeting them is a significant time sink in terms of like time and effort, and it's a huge opportunity cost for, especially for smaller companies that don't have a head of compliance or don't have a whole team of people running around to meet these compliance standards.
Yeah, and to your first point, I think kind of a shift is happening in the industry where compliance and security are being now seen as sort of feature number zero, and that wasn't traditionally the case in the past. Like this, since these things have become table stakes. Like there's you can be talking with a bank or such players without having these credentials. Yeah, we can observe from Belvo that this shift is happening. And Claudia, what do you think about these challenges of the regulatory environments from your from the perspective of AWS? What do you see?
So we have a lot of challenges. We see clients from all over the world. In Latin America, each regulation is different. Mexican regulation is very different to the one we have in Colombia. And there are clients that are trying to expand their business, maybe from UK to Mexico, from Argentina, they are coming to Mexico. They are trying to expand. And the regulation, of course, is different in each country. And every time they try to go into a country, they need to do this assessment. As Matt was saying, first of all, is what is this regulation asking me for? It's not clear in plain Spanish or plain English. It's something they need to interpret, and they need to make it efficiently. So how do I comply with the law? And I can be efficient. I don't want to spend all my resources in compliance. I need to do much more. I need to operate my business. So how do I do it? That is the first challenge. And the other one I see from the customers is that sometimes they have a whole range of suppliers. For example, we have some that are running in AWS, but we are not the final supplier. Maybe they are offering us software as a service. So now the fintech faces the challenge of how do I ensure each of the suppliers in this chain are compliant to the regulation for this particular country. So I think those are two major things that the customers are focusing on and struggling a little bit to navigate.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to your first point regarding like I think I wish regulators in the different countries were more kind of receptive to like if you have an ISO 27001 certification, that should be okay to that should be your way of kind of showing that you comply with certain things, right? But what's happening in reality is you sort of go over and over kind of the same things in various countries. I wish this worked a little better. But yeah, and at the end of the day, everything kind of boils down to the same set of core rules. But still, I wish these things were more kind of reusable across different geos. And talking about different geos, I wanted to spend some time on the concept of data residency. Like this has become kind of a topic in the last few years. It is more and more common to be operating a certain company from a place serving a market which is somewhere else, and the other way around. So like and there has been like there is some kind of scrutiny now around like where is your data, where is the data being processed, is this is it within your country, like what is even your country, like is it the nationality of the user, is it where the user is connecting from, like so many questions, right? So again, data residency is sort of becoming a topic, at least in our experience, and so like I would like to ask you, like, what are your thoughts on data residency? And perhaps Matt, you can go first here.
Yeah, I think that data residency is a nice ideal, right? Like if we have, if you're in the EU and your data doesn't leave the EU, great, right? Like that's a nice ideal to aspire to. But I think in practice, when you think about like, actually having that become a reality, like I think that it ends up being a very fuzzy topic because data can mean a lot of different things depending on the company, right? And for example, if you take a cloud storage company, I think we can agree that the photos that I've uploaded to this cloud storage company are data that should live, that is like data that we would want to have resident close to the users or whatever. But what about like the metadata about my account, like my username and my email address, or the metadata of those photos? And should it be that I don't exist if I'm not accessing it outside of my country, or like I can't, even the routing table of like where does this person's data live? Like there's personally identifiable information that could be stored at some central server that's not existing in every country. And I think that like just it's complicated, and I think that this is sort of one of those nice like examples of regulators sort of being disconnected from what it looks like in practice and tech on the ground. And I think as I've thought about this and as I've worked at companies that have struggled with this, with complying with these regulations and best practices, I think the advice that I would have is when your customers ask for this for the first time, be really thoughtful about what constitutes customer data and what doesn't, because certain things are easier to separate by geography than others in your infrastructure. And the last thing you want is to accidentally sign yourself up for a contract that has you locally homing data that's really, really hard to locally home for like 2 customers that actually need it. It can end up being just a huge investment in architecture and a distraction, honestly, if you're not thoughtful about what customer data means and what needs to be locally homed versus what can be centrally stored.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Like, this is something that we work with pretty quite a lot. And it is a common question that comes up: where's my data? At Belvo, like, where is my data? Is it in Latam or somewhere else? Is it in Brazil or is it in Mexico? And sometimes it's interesting how kind of beliefs and myths kind of mix up with the reality, and people start asking like questions which might not exactly come from a regulatory kind of point of view, but more like, hey, this is what my company would desire, would aspire to do with my data. So sometimes it's also different to kind of distinguish what are the things that are coming from the regulator versus the things that are coming from the company just wants to do some things in a different way. But then sometimes they start also supporting these beliefs with regulatory kind of topics, which makes things a little confusing sometimes. And Claudia, like AWS has data storage and data processing facilities all over the world, right? So what's your stance on data residency?
Yeah, so what we have seen is coming from the regulators. So the regulators, of course, are not evil. They have concerns. They are protecting the citizens and they are protecting the financial system. For what I've seen, data residency requirements come from the regulator from two sources: either privacy, meaning confidentiality, keeping like the data secret, and the other one is coming from a concern that the operations could be disrupted. For example, if they are in some other place in the world and suddenly that connection gets lost, how can the financial system keep operating if the data is not here? So I have seen those concerns come from are the ones that have the regulator, either privacy or how to keep the operation running if the data is somewhere else and the connection is disrupted. So I think what Matt was saying is really important, and to make sure for which data they want to keep it in a certain place and which is not that relevant, and what is the purpose of that. Having that very clear would be very helpful for all the financial institutions, especially fintechs. And I think we also need to consider all the elements of security and the likelihood of really being a risk that the data is somewhere else. Is that really something that represents a risk for all data, for all processes? That's something that would be very helpful to evaluate. It's not the same, for example, the payment system, which is very critical, or some other operational process that may be fine running outside. So that's what I've been seeing.
And Claudia, you touched upon an interesting topic of the topic of trust, right? So building trust. What do you think fintech companies can do in order to really improve and build trust around their services? Again, we work in an environment that trust as a as a core pillar of everything that we do. But how do we build this trust in this industry?
First of all, doing security not just for to be compliant and to mark a check, but really understanding the core of that activity, which is protecting the assets and the customers. So I think having that view would help to define a strategy that help build this trust, because if I feel my data is secure, I will begin trusting you even more, because this is financial data, so it's sensitive information mostly. So I think that's something that the fintechs could do, making sure security is in their core values.
Right. And Matt, like again, Vanta is again trust, compliance, very core of what you do. What do you think about again building trust?
Yeah, I think Claudia, you really hit it on the head in that compliance is a reflection of the security that you should be practicing. And I think if you follow a compliance standard to the letter, I think that gets you like B- security. It's like better than nothing, but like really the compliance standard should reflect your continued and ingrained investment in security in your company. And I think what's interesting about like the role that technology has to play in this also is really interesting, because there's a broader industry trend in security toward having smaller teams that leverage technology to practice better security, as opposed to the current state of the art, which is large security teams with lots of humans running manual processes and spreadsheets, et cetera. And leveraging technology enables, rather, having a large team of humans who are manually doing access reviews or manually checking on things or manually verifying that things are configured correctly is as good as humans can do, which is okay. And humans make mistakes, humans miss things, humans are easily distracted. And I think that when companies leverage technology to check all of those invariants constantly, or to validate their security posture constantly, they're able to do so much more. And I think that takes leveraging technology takes two forms. Like, one is just preventing insecure situations in the first place. Like, instead of checking access control in a spreadsheet, automate it and programmatically set it up via something like Okta. Instead of manually checking to make sure that everybody's hard drives are encrypted, make sure that they cannot be unencrypted via mobile device management or something like that. The other way in which companies can leverage technology for this is to automate the checking. So rather than having humans validate your AWS configuration to make sure you don't have S3 buckets that are public with credit card transactions in them, use a tool like Vanta to automate that check and check hourly as to whether that's the case or not, and notify you if it's not. And so I think in order to build trust, I think what I think is even better than trust is a world in which we don't have to trust that people are practicing good security, because those companies are providing the data to show it for themselves. And if you have a collection of data that represents the security posture of a company, then I don't have to trust that you're practicing good security because you got a SOC 2 certificate 9 months ago. I can see that you're practicing good security and see how quickly you respond to security incidents when they pop up. See how quickly you respond to potential misconfigurations and things like that. And so I think technology can actually help us supersede trust as a form of security proof, because the potential customer or the prospect, whatever, can just look at the data themselves.
Yeah, I think, Matt, you touched upon a very interesting point, which is something that I usually describe as sort of point-in-time security or point-in-time compliance versus continuous compliance, right? And and we're seeing in the industry how kind of point-in-time security is still kind of what the vast majority of players are doing, but in today's world of fast-moving platforms and infrastructure and so on, that is quickly becoming very outdated. And actually, this is kind of a good segue into the kind of next topic, which is how do we balance speed of execution with compliance and security, because these things are they might be competing for the same resources, right? At the end of the day, many kind of security and compliance initiatives will require engineering and product resources, and those are the same resources that are needed to build your features and product. And so, like, how can we kind of reconcile these two work streams, and how we can harmonize them, and how we can make sure that the company can be compliant, it can be secure, but at the same way it doesn't become this kind of slow moving thing that does not deliver to their customers. So what and perhaps, Matt, I'm sure you have very strong opinions on this point, Matt, because that's exactly what you do, right, for a living. So tell us everything about it.
Yeah, well, I'd be interested to turn the question on you, because Belvo is a relatively small company that needs to engage with security and compliance early on. And my hot take on this is that investing, I think it is a false comparison to say that investing in making your company secure is at the expense of actually moving quickly, because there are a lot of things that you do in service of security that can actually accelerate companies rather than slow them down. And the earlier you invest in these things, the easier it is to practice them and actually lay the foundation for a efficient and successful business. And just to share some examples on this, things like having a deployment workflow that's easy, it's simple to understand and easy to roll back. So you can track what changes are in production and how they got there. Things like code reviews, things like centralizing access management, things like consolidating workflows and limiting your surface area, things like streamlining your onboarding and offboarding for new employees. Those are all good things to do in service of security, but they're also just good things to do in terms of being efficient. And if we're doing code reviews, for example, and you're looking at my code, you will find security issues. You're also going to find a bunch of other bugs. And you're also going to use that as an opportunity to teach others in your organization about how your code works. And I think what's really interesting to me is that because the regulatory environment and the emphasis on security is forcing smaller and smaller companies to practice security earlier, I think what it actually does is it sets them up to practice better security in the long run as well. I was at a company previously that decided to go and get its SOC 2 compliance, I think 7 or 8 years into its journey, and trying to bolt on processes to manage access to various services and instrumenting code reviews and tests and stuff like that at a 400-person engineering team is much more difficult than trying to instrument those things at a 4-person engineering team. So I think that there, especially if companies are leveraging technology and not having to hire people to block things and not having to rely on inefficient processes and emails to actually practice good security rather than demonstrate that they're practicing good security, I think that investing in this can actually accelerate a business rather than hold it back. But I actually defer to you on this, since you're also a head of engineering at a relatively small company, and I'm curious what you think about that.
Like, to be honest, I could not agree more with you on this. Like, I do think that many times good security practices can equate to good engineering practices, and sometimes and especially if we talk about kind of security and compliance automation, you sort of end up having to automate certain things, and like, it wouldn't be acceptable for a company to deploy things kind of pushing 40 buttons manually all the time, if you want to be kind of compliant at speed, right? So, like, you need to be automating that, and so actually you end up being faster just because you're sort of self-imposing to yourself all of this kind of good engineering practices. So, like, I do agree with you. Like, I don't think that these things are necessarily at odds. Like, if you look at them from the right perspective, and if you're able to kind of put the right tooling in place so that you don't have to do like 1,000 different things manually all the time. Because if you end up kind of having these kind of infinite spreadsheets and people kind of looking things around and kind of inventorying things around kind of manually all the time, like, yes, I do think that is not that probably won't help the company kind of move faster. It'll actually be a drag on the company, right? But if you kind of building the right automation and kind of following good engineering practices, I think these two things produce a compliant company, and yeah, I think they actually can live together very well. This is at least the experience at Belvo. Like, we're not observing that compliance is being a drag on the company. If anything, it has forced us to do certain things in a much more kind of automated way, and the net result is that we're actually happier, and we're moving faster. And Claudia, I'm gonna hand it over to you. Like, what's your what do you think from your perspective, like speed to market and compliance? Like, how do you see these things from your perspective, from the AWS perspective?
Yes, I agree with both of you. I think it's a paradigm thing. We don't need to think of security as a different thing that we do later on the way. It's something that you need to build in since you start planning the process or the new service or whatever you are doing. It needs to be there. It's part of the foundation. So it's not like fit in security into the service. They need to be always together in order for it to work and for us to progress, because so in the end part of the requirements there are things that they need to meet, and what can like drag agility is not doing it from the first place. If you like push it in later because that's not fun enough, or I don't know, that's going to cost money. That's when it becomes an issue, because you will have to redesign things in order to build security in top, opposed to what would happen if you do it from the beginning and everyone is in the same page on regards the security and the regulatory requirements the solution needs to meet. So I think that's the key aspect. It's not driving agility unless you don't do it at the appropriate moment, which is since the beginning and during all the cycle of the service or the process.
Yeah, and speaking about speed, like we cannot. And by the way, this is our last topic for today. We cannot talk about speed without mentioning serverless, right? So many people in the industry kind of connect these two dots, right? So when it comes to speed of execution, many people in the industry think that serverless is one of the answers to executing things fast and also in a compliance/secure way. So you both, I know that you've both been exposed to serverless computing, and I'm curious to kind of hear your opinion of how is serverless computing kind of how is it helping achieve compliance and security at speed? And Matt, you wanna go first?
I think the person who works at AWS should go first.
Okay. Well, Claudia, you want to take it?
She's the expert.
Sure, sure, of course.
I mean, there's one thing that we can see is you're really pushing serverless very hard, at least on marketing material. So yeah, you're right. Let's go, Claudia. You go first.
Yes, well, with serverless, AWS, for example, owns more responsibility on security, which, as you know, is part of our customer obsession culture. Security is our top priority. So, and the customer will have to worry less about certain aspects, like some patching of the operating system. That will be on us. And you will have our SOC 2 reports and ISO reports to make sure that's actually happening. And you can just worry on building your solution. What I do think it's important to have in mind is that serverless does not mean AWS will take care of all the security. There are still some things that the person building the solution will have to take care of, like protecting the data, managing the access to that solution. However, it does help because AWS will own more responsibilities when we talk about serverless.
Yeah, Matt, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think that this just sort of folds into the prior conversation we had around best practices. I think having serverless infrastructure limits the number of things that can go wrong by having stale packages on those machines, by having long running processes that are potentially open to getting popped. I think by designing around serverless computing services, like it just eliminates some of that risk. And I think a big theme of generally practicing good security is consolidating workflows, limiting your risk surface area, just simplifying things as much as you can. And serverless is not to Claudia's point, it's not a silver bullet, right? Like just if you use the word magical serverless, you're not unbreachable ever, right? But it's just one of many things you can do to simplify the infrastructure, reduce the attack surface area, just give attackers fewer things and fewer entry points.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of hype around the concept of serverless, right? But yeah, like I agree with both of you. I think this is, a great way to both be compliant, but also essentially focus on the sort of differential value that the company can provide to its customers. Like we at Belvo are also using quite a few kind of serverless components, and we intend to do more and more investments in serverless. We see it as a kind of a competitive advantage. The more we can do there, the more we can do for our customers. All right, and with that, I think we are on time. And I would like to thank you both for your time today. It was a very nice conversation that we had. So thank you, Claudia, and thank you, Matt, and yeah, thank you for this session.
Thank you so much for having us.
So it was a pleasure. Thank you.